Imagine being told by your own mother to get out and never come back and realizing in that moment she truly meant it. I walked away that Sunday night, determined never to return. But weeks later, when my father finally knocked on my door and asked why I'd stopped coming to our family dinners, the truth shattered what little remained of our bond. What followed wasn't just my escape from years of emotional abuse, it was my carefully orchestrated revenge that would expose my mother's perfect facade to everyone who mattered to her. My name is Emily Sanders, and for 29 years, I've carried the weight of being my mother's greatest disappointment. Growing up in Westerville, a pristine suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, our house looked like something from a magazine manicured lawn, white picket fence, seasonal wreaths that Margaret, my mother, changed religiously every holiday. To the neighbors, we were the perfect family. Behind closed doors, we were anything but. Margaret Sanders had mastered the art of public perfection. At church socials, she'd beam while talking about her Emily. But at home, nothing I did was ever enough. Straight A's meant I should have gotten into a better college. My promotion at work meant I was too focused on career instead of family. Even my appearance was a constant source of criticism. My hair was either too long or too short, my clothes too casual or trying too hard. I learned early that love in our house was conditional, measured in how well I could conform to Margaret's impossible standards. Every achievement was met with a backhanded compliment. "Oh, you made honor roll Sarah Miller's daughter got into the National Honor Society." When I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State, she spent my graduation dinner talking about my cousin Jessica's engagement to a doctor. My father, Richard, perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight. He'd retreat behind his newspaper during Margaret's tirades, pretending not to hear when she'd dissect every aspect of my life over dinner. His philosophy was simple: keep your head down, don't make waves, and maybe she'll tire herself out. He never defended me, never stood up to her. His silence was its own form of betrayal. I threw myself into academics and work as an escape route, while other kids hung out at the mall. I was studying in the library or working shifts at the local bookstore, saving every penny for college. I didn't want to just leave Westerville. I wanted to build a life so different from my mother's that she wouldn't recognize it. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd inherited her drive for perfection, just directed differently. Where she obsessed over appearances and social standing, I obsessed over grades and career advancement. But mine had a purpose: freedom. Every A on my transcript, every dollar saved, was another step away from that house. College was my first taste of what life could be without Margaret's constant scrutiny. For 4 glorious years at Ohio State, I could breathe. I made friends who liked me for who I was, not who my mother wanted me to be. I discovered I was actually funny, that people enjoyed my company when I wasn't walking on eggshells. I dated without having to endure Margaret's interrogation about their family background and career prospects. But even 300 miles away, her voice lived in my head. When I'd catch myself relaxing, enjoying a lazy Sunday with friends, I'd hear her, "Successful people don't waste their weekends." When I'd consider skipping a study session for a party, "This is why you'll never amount to anything." The physical distance couldn't silence the critic she'd installed in my brain. After graduation, staying in Columbus was an easy choice. I told my parents it was for the job opportunities, but really, it was self-preservation. I needed space to figure out who Emily Sanders was when she wasn't being molded, criticized, and found wanting. The 2-hour drive between Columbus and Westerville felt like a protective moat around the life I was trying to build. Landing a job at Brightline Creative Agency felt like winning the lottery. It was a mid-sized firm in downtown Columbus, known for taking risks on fresh talent and unconventional campaigns. My interview had gone brilliantly until they asked about my weekend availability for occasional client events. I'd hesitated just long enough for the interviewer to notice before assuring them I was completely flexible. The truth was, I was already calculating how to manage Margaret's mandatory Sunday dinners. Those first years at Brightline were everything I'd dreamed of. I threw myself into every project, staying late to perfect presentations, volunteering for challenging accounts others avoided. My colleagues became my chosen family creative, ambitious people who celebrated each other's wins without hidden barbs. When I landed my first major client, they threw me a surprise party. No one mentioned how someone else deserved it more. My tiny studio apartment in the Short North District was my sanctuary. I decorated it exactly how I wanted bold colors Margaret would call attention-seeking, mismatched vintage furniture she'd deem shabby, and walls covered in art from local artists instead of the appropriate family photos she insisted normal people displayed. It was messy and vibrant and completely mine. By 26, I'd worked my way up to brand consultant. By 28, senior brand consultant with my own office and a team of 3. My boss, Janet, called me unstoppable. Clients requested me specifically. I was building something real, something that belonged to me. But every Sunday, I'd make the drive back to Westerville. The tradition had started innocently enough when I first moved to Columbus. Family dinner every Sunday, Margaret had declared, so we don't lose touch. It sounded reasonable at the time. What kind of daughter refuses to see her parents once a week? The reality was torture by 1,000 cuts. I'd wake up Saturday morning with a knot in my stomach, knowing Sunday was coming. Saturday nights were ruined by anxiety dreams about forgetting something important or showing up late. The 2-hour drive to Westerville felt like approaching a courthouse for sentencing. Dinner was at 6 p.m. sharp. Arriving at 5:55 meant I clearly didn't want to spend time with family. 6:05 meant I had no respect for other people's time. The meal itself was a minefield. Margaret would interrogate me about work, then dismiss my achievements. She'd ask about my dating life, then critique my standards too picky if I was single, not picky enough if I was dating someone. "Are you seeing anyone?" she'd asked last month, carving the roast with surgical precision. "I've been on a few dates with someone from the tech startup downstairs," I'd offered carefully. Tech startup. Her knife paused. So, unemployed with delusions of grandeur. You know, Jennifer's daughter just married an orthopedic surgeon, third-generation doctor. Richard would study his plate like it contained the secrets of the universe. The drive back to Columbus Sunday nights was when I'd finally let myself cry. Tears of frustration, exhaustion, and rage at myself for continuing this charade. I'd arrive at my apartment around 9 p.m., emotionally drained, and try to prepare for Monday morning meetings while my mother's criticisms echoed in my head. My work started suffering. Janet noticed I was less energetic on Mondays, less available for Sunday evening emergency calls from clients. My team learned not to schedule important presentations on Monday mornings because I'd be foggy and irritable. The job I loved was being poisoned by the weekly dose of Margaret's venom. I tried setting boundaries once, told them I could only come twice a month due to work commitments. Margaret had called me crying, actually, crying about how I was abandoning family, how she'd failed as a mother to raise such a selfish daughter. Richard called an hour later, his voice tired. "Just apologize. Make this easier on everyone." So I apologized and returned to my weekly sentence, watching my mother serve judgment with the mashed potatoes while my father perfected his vanishing act at the head of the table. Meeting Daniel changed everything, though I didn't realize it at first. He worked at the tech startup 2 floors down from Brightline, the same one Margaret had dismissed as unemployed with delusions of grandeur. He was brilliant, kind, and had this way of really seeing people that made you feel like you mattered. We met in the building's coffee shop on a Monday morning when I was particularly wrecked from Sunday dinner. I'd spilled coffee on my presentation folders, and instead of the polite avoidance most people would offer, Daniel handed me napkins and said, "Rough weekend." Something in his voice made me laugh instead of cry. "Family dinner?" I said, like that explained everything. He nodded knowingly. "The kind where you leave feeling worse about yourself than when you arrived." That stopped me cold. Most people said things like, "Family is family," or "I'm sure they mean well." Daniel got it immediately. We started having coffee together on Monday mornings. It became my recovery ritual. Daniel's easy conversation and genuine interest slowly replacing Margaret's voice in my head. He never pushed for details, just listened when I offered them. After 6 weeks of coffee, he asked me to dinner. After 3 months of dating, I finally told him everything. We were at his apartment, cooking pasta together on a Saturday night. I was anxious and distracted, checking the clock repeatedly. "Sunday dinner tomorrow," he asked gently. I nodded, my stomach already churning. I should probably leave early tonight. I need to prepare myself mentally. Daniel turned off the stove and faced me fully. "Emily, can I ask you something? What would happen if you just didn't go?" "I have to go. It's family dinner. It's tradition." But what would actually happen? Would they disown you? Cut you off financially? Show up at your work? I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. I was 29 years old, financially independent, living on my own. What could they actually do to me? Margaret would guilt me, make me feel terrible, tell everyone how ungrateful I am. And how is that different from what happens when you do go? The question hung in the air like a revelation. Daniel wasn't judging or pushing, just holding up a mirror to something I'd never really examined. "You know what this reminds me of," he continued, sitting beside me on the couch. "There's this psychology concept called intermittent reinforcement. It's what keeps people in toxic cycles. Sometimes Margaret is probably decent to you. Right. Maybe compliments something small or has a moment of normal conversation." I thought about it. Sometimes, rarely. But yeah. Those rare moments keep you coming back, hoping this time will be different. But Emily, I've watched you for 3 months now. Every Saturday you start shutting down. Every Sunday night you come back destroyed. Monday mornings you're a shell of yourself. By Wednesday you're finally you again. Then Saturday comes and the cycle starts over. "It's just 1 day a week," I said weakly. "No, it's not." His voice was gentle but firm. "It's Saturday spent dreading Sunday. It's Sunday spent being torn down. It's Monday recovering. That's 3 days out of every 7, almost half your life being affected by one toxic dinner." He pulled out his phone and showed me an article about emotional abuse patterns. As I read, I saw my life reflected back at me, the criticism disguised as concern, the comparison to others, the silent enabler parent, the obligation disguised as love. This part, I pointed to a section about breaking the cycle. It says the hardest part is accepting that the relationship might never be what you need it to be. "What do you need it to be?" Daniel asked. I thought for a long moment. I need a mother who actually likes me, who's proud of me, who doesn't see me as a project to be fixed or a disappointment to be managed. And in 29 years, has Margaret ever been that person? The answer was so obvious it felt like a physical blow. "No." "Then maybe," Daniel said carefully, "it's time to stop expecting her to become someone she's never shown you she can be. Maybe it's time to protect yourself instead of hoping she'll stop hurting you." That night, I stayed at Daniel's apartment. We talked until 3 a.m. about boundaries, about chosen family, about the difference between giving up on someone and accepting who they are. For the first time, I considered that prioritizing my mental health wasn't selfish, it was necessary. But when Sunday morning came, I still got in my car and drove to Westerville. The difference was, this time I knew why not out of love or duty, but fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of judgment, fear of being the bad daughter. Daniel texted me as I pulled into my parents' driveway. "Remember, you're choosing this, which means you can choose differently whenever you're ready." The Sunday that changed everything started like any other. I arrived at my parents' house at 5:58 p.m., parking my Honda Civic behind Richard's Lexus in the driveway. The house looked immaculate as always. Margaret had already put up fall decorations, even though it was barely September. Pumpkins arranged by size on the porch steps, a wreath of autumn leaves that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. I sat in my car for a moment, taking deep breaths. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "You've got this. Remember, You can leave any time. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. Finally. I was beginning to think you weren't coming. It was 6:01 p.m. The dining room was set with the good china, as always. The smell of pot roast filled the air Margaret's signature Sunday dish. Richard was already seated, scrolling through his phone until Margaret shot him a look. He put it away immediately. How was your week? Emily, Margaret asked, but before I could answer, she continued. I ran into Mrs. Patterson at the grocery store. Her daughter Jennifer just got promoted to partner at her firm. 27 years old. Partner. Can you imagine? That's nice for her, I said, serving myself salad. Nice. It's exceptional. Of course. Jennifer doesn't waste her time at some creative agency playing with colors and fonts. I felt the familiar burn in my chest, but kept my voice level. I actually need to talk to you both about next weekend. Margaret's eyebrows rose. What about it? I won't be able to make dinner. I have a major presentation Monday morning for our biggest client. The entire team is working through the weekend to prepare. The silence was deafening. Richard looked between us nervously. Margaret set down her fork with deliberate precision. I see. Your job is more important than your family. It's not about importance. It's about professional responsibility. This presentation could mean... I don't care what it could mean. Her voice was rising. We have had Sunday dinner every week since you moved to that city. It's the one thing I ask of you. One thing. Mom, I come every single week. I'm asking for one exception. Exception. She laughed bitterly. Do you know what I told the ladies at church about you? How proud I was that despite your busy career, you never miss family dinner. And now you want me to explain that my daughter chose work over family. Margaret, Richard said quietly, maybe just this once. Don't you dare take her side, Margaret whirled on him. This is exactly the problem. Nobody in this family understands commitment anymore. I stood up, my hands shaking. I'm 29 years old. I'm allowed to have a life that doesn't revolve around this dinner. A life. Margaret stood too, her face flushed. You call that empty apartment and meaningless job a life you're nearly 30 with no husband, no children, nothing to show for yourself except some ridiculous title at a company nobody's heard of. My career is not meaningless. Career. She spat the word like poison. Jennifer has a career. You have a job playing artist while real adults build actual futures. You're an embarrassment. Emily, do you understand that an embarrassment to this family? Something inside me snapped. Years of swallowed responses and bitten tongues suddenly broke free. I'm an embarrassment. I'm successful, independent, and happy when I'm not here. The only embarrassment is having to pretend this toxic ritual is normal. Margaret's face went from red to purple. Toxic. This family is toxic to you. Yes. The word exploded out of me. Every week I come here to be insulted, compared, and torn down. You don't love me. Mom, you love the idea of a daughter you can control and show off, but I'm not that person, and I never will be. Then get out! Margaret screamed, pointing at the door. Get out and never come back if this family is so toxic. If I'm such a terrible mother, then leave. Don't you ever set foot in this house again. I looked at Richard, waiting for him to say something. Anything. He stared at his plate. Dad. My voice cracked. He didn't look up. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll go. And this time, I mean it. Margaret laughed harshly. Don't be dramatic. You'll be back next Sunday, tail between your legs, apologizing like always. I looked her straight in the eye. No, I won't. You just told me to never come back. I'm finally going to listen to you. I walked out of that dining room, through the foyer with its gallery of family photos, all lies, every smiling face, and out the front door. I heard Margaret yelling something behind me, but the blood rushing in my ears drowned it out. As I drove away, I didn't cry. For the first time in my adult life, I felt free. The first week was hell. I'd driven straight to Daniel's apartment that Sunday night, and the moment he opened the door, I collapsed. Not crying. Not dramatically, just a complete shutdown of everything I'd been holding together for so long. He guided me to his couch, wrapped me in a blanket, and didn't ask questions. He just held me while I stared at nothing, replaying Margaret's words over and over. She told me to never come back. I finally whispered around 11 p.m. I know, Daniel said softly. You did the right thing. Then why do I feel so broken? Because even toxic love is still love, and losing it, even when it's necessary, still hurts. I called in sick Monday and Tuesday. Janet was understanding I'd never taken a sick day in 3 years. I spent those days alternating between numbness and panic. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart raced, expecting Margaret's call demanding an apology. But it never came. Neither she nor Richard reached out. The silence was deafening. By Wednesday, anger started creeping in. They hadn't even checked if I was okay. Their daughter had walked out after being told to never return, and they couldn't be bothered to send a text. It confirmed what I'd always suspected, but never wanted to admit their love was entirely conditional on my compliance. Thursday, I returned to work. Janet took one look at me and closed my office door. What happened? I finally stood up to my mother. She told me to never come back. Janet was quiet for a moment. Good for you. I've watched you deteriorate every Monday for years. Whatever happened, you look different. Hurt. Yes, but also lighter. She was right. Despite the pain, something heavy had lifted. I threw myself into the presentation prep, and for the first time, I could work Sunday without that sick feeling in my stomach. That first Sunday alone was surreal. I woke up at 9 a.m. instead of my usual anxious 6 a.m. start. Daniel made breakfast pancakes with strawberries, something I'd never have on Sundays because Margaret insisted on light lunches before her heavy dinners. We went to the farmer's market, something I'd always wanted to do but couldn't because Sundays were reserved. How are you feeling? Daniel asked as we browsed the flower stalls. Like I'm playing hooky, I admitted. Like any moment someone's going to catch me and drag me back to Westerville. No one's coming, he assured me. This is your life now. You get to choose how to spend it. We had lunch at a cafe, went to an art exhibit, took a long walk in the park. Normal Sunday activities that felt revolutionary to me. By evening, around 6 p.m., my body tensed automatically. Dinner time at the Sanders house. But instead of sitting at that polished table being dissected, I was on Daniel's couch, eating Chinese takeout and watching a movie. The second Sunday was easier. Daniel and I joined his friends for brunch, something I'd been invited to before, but always had to decline. They welcomed me warmly, and I realized I was laughing. Really laughing. At noon on a Sunday. His friend Mark mentioned they did this every week, and without thinking, I said, I'll be here. By the third Sunday, I'd established my own routine. Morning yoga class, coffee and reading at my favorite bookshop, afternoon with friends or Daniel, evening preparing for the week ahead but peacefully, not frantically recovering from emotional warfare. The fourth Sunday, I was at my apartment doing laundry when it hit me. I hadn't cried in 3 weeks. The constant knot in my stomach was gone. I was sleeping through the night without anxiety dreams about forgetting something important or disappointing Margaret. My work performance skyrocketed. Janet commented that I seemed unleashed. The presentation I'd prepared instead of attending that fateful dinner landed us a 3-year contract with our biggest client. My team threw an impromptu celebration, and I didn't have to leave early to make a 2-hour drive. But the silence from my parents remained complete. Not a call, text, or email. Richard, who'd occasionally sent me articles about financial planning or weather warnings for Columbus, went completely dark. It was as if I'd died to them the moment I walked out that door. The strangest part was discovering who I was without the weekly emotional beating. I was funnier than I'd thought. More creative. More willing to take risks. I started dating Daniel officially. without the anxiety of eventually having to present him for Margaret's approval. I redecorated my apartment with even bolder choices. I signed up for an improv class, something Margaret would have called attention-seeking nonsense. 6 weeks after that Sunday, I finally stopped checking my phone expecting them to reach out, the hope that they'd realize their mistake, apologize, and want their daughter back gradually died. In its place grew something stronger, the realization that I'd been orphaned long before I walked out that door. Now I was just finally accepting it, 8 weeks after that final Sunday. Richard appeared at my apartment door on a Thursday evening at 7:45 p.m. I'd just gotten home from work, still in my blazer, keys still in my hand. For a moment, we just stared at each other. He looked older, grayer, somehow smaller than the man who'd sat silently at that dining room table. "Emily," he said, and his voice cracked slightly. "Can I come in?" Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face, but the daughter in me, the one still hoping for a father, let him in. He looked around my apartment, the bold colors, the art, the life I'd built with something like wonder. "This is nice, very you. What are you doing here, Dad?" He sat on my couch, uninvited, looking lost. "Why did you stop coming?" The question was so absurd I actually laughed. "Are you serious right now?" "Your mother is upset. She expected you to apologize and return by now." "She told me to get out and never come back. You were there. You heard every word." Richard shifted uncomfortably. "You know how she gets. She didn't mean it." "Yes, she did. And even if she didn't, I meant it when I left." He looked at me then, really looked at me, for perhaps the first time in years. "You're different." "I'm happy," I said simply. "For the first time in my adult life, I'm actually happy. I wake up Sunday mornings without dread. I don't spend Saturdays sick with anxiety. I can just exist." "Your mother misses you." "No, she doesn't. She misses having someone to control and criticize. There's a difference." Richard's face reddened. "That's not fair. She loves you." "Does she? Because love doesn't feel like being told you're an embarrassment. Love doesn't feel like constant comparison to everyone else's daughters. Love doesn't feel like walking on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing." "She's your mother." "And you're my father." The words exploded out of me. Where were you all those years when she was tearing me apart? Where were you hiding behind your newspaper, checking your phone, staring at your plate? You never once defended me. Not once. I was trying to keep the peace. No, you were being a coward. I was standing now, 29 years of suppressed anger finally finding its voice. You chose your own comfort over your daughter's well-being. Every single Sunday, you watched her destroy me piece by piece, and you said nothing. Richard stood too, his jaw clenched. "It's not that simple. You don't understand marriage. I understand that you failed me, both of you, but especially you, because you knew it was wrong. I could see it in your eyes every time she went too far. You knew, and you chose to let it happen rather than risk her turning on you." "That's enough." "No, it's not nearly enough. Do you know what Daniel asked me last week? He asked if I wanted kids someday. And you know what terrifies me, that I'll become her. Or worse, that I'll become you standing by while someone I'm supposed to protect gets destroyed." Richard's face went pale. "Emily, I did my best." "Your best was silence. Your best was abandonment disguised as peacekeeping. Your best taught me that I couldn't count on anyone to protect me, not even my own father." He sat back down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 62 years. "What do you want me to say?" "I wanted you to say something then, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 months ago, but you didn't, and now it's too late." "So that's it. You're cutting us out completely." "Mom cut me out when she screamed at me to never come back. You cut me out when you chose to stay silent. I'm just finally accepting what's been true all along. I've been alone in that family my entire life." Richard stood to leave, then paused at the door. "She wants you to come to Thanksgiving." I almost laughed at the audacity. "No." "Christmas, then." "No." "Emily, please, think about what you're doing to this family." "I'm not doing anything to this family. I'm saving myself from it." He left without another word. I stood in my apartment, shaking but somehow stronger. Daniel found me there an hour later, still standing in the same spot. "My father came by," I said numbly. "What did he want?" "For me to come back, to pretend nothing happened, to keep being their emotional punching bag so they can maintain their perfect family image." Daniel wrapped his arms around me. "What did you tell him?" "The truth. Finally, after all these years, I told him the truth. That night, I realized something crucial. Richard's visit wasn't about reconciliation or understanding. It was about restoring the status quo. They didn't want their daughter back. They wanted their scapegoat back. The family dynamic only worked if I was there to absorb Margaret's venom and validate Richard's cowardice by accepting it. But I was done being their sacrifice. The revelation crystallized over the next few days. They didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because without me, their carefully constructed dynamic had collapsed. Margaret had no one to blame for her disappointments. Richard had no buffer between himself and his wife's criticism. I'd been their emotional dumping ground, and now they were drowning in their own toxicity. That's when the idea of revenge first took root. Not the hot, impulsive kind born of fresh wounds, but something colder, more calculated. For years, Margaret had maintained her image as the perfect mother, the devoted churchwoman, the pillar of the Westerville community. What if everyone could see what I'd seen all along? My marketing expertise gave me unique tools. I knew how to build narratives, how to present information for maximum impact, how to destroy a carefully crafted image. The question was whether I wanted to use them. The decision came after discovering something that made my blood run cold. Through a mutual acquaintance's Facebook post, I learned Margaret had been telling people I'd joined a cult in Columbus. That's why I'd abandoned my family. She was actually garnering sympathy as the poor mother whose daughter had been brainwashed. That lie flipped a switch in me. It wasn't enough to simply walk away. She was rewriting history, painting herself as the victim while destroying my reputation. Two could play at that game, except I had something she didn't: the truth. I started documenting everything. Years of emails where she'd torn apart my achievements. Text messages comparing me unfavorably to everyone from cousins to complete strangers. Voicemails I'd saved where her concern dripped with contempt. My marketing brain kicked into high gear, organizing evidence like a campaign portfolio. But I needed more. I needed proof of the financial manipulation I'd suspected for years. Margaret had always insisted on having access to my bank accounts for emergencies when I was in college, and though I'd changed them since, I remembered odd withdrawals she'd explained away as family expenses. Using the skills I'd learned from our agency's forensic accounting consultant, I went digging. Credit card statements from my college years revealed purchases I'd never made: designer clothes, jewelry, spa treatments, all while she'd been telling me we couldn't afford textbooks without loans. She'd been stealing from my college fund while lecturing me about fiscal responsibility. The church financial records were public, and what I found there was even more damning. Margaret, as treasurer of the Women's Auxiliary, had some interesting patterns in the donation records. Deposits that matched the amounts she'd taken from my accounts, later withdrawn for charitable expenses that coincidentally aligned with her shopping sprees. I compiled everything into a presentation: clean, professional, devastating. The kind of exposé I'd create for a client wanting to destroy a competitor. Except this competitor was my mother. Daniel found me working on it at 2 a.m. one night, surrounded by papers and laptop screens. "Emily, what is all this?" "Evidence," I said, not looking up. 29 years of evidence. He sat beside me, reviewing the documents. "This is Extensive. What are you planning to do with it? Margaret's built her entire identity on being the perfect mother, the trustworthy church treasurer, the woman everyone should aspire to be. I'm going to show everyone who she really is. Are you sure this is what you want? Once you do this, there's no going back. I showed him the Facebook posts about me joining a cult. She's already destroying my reputation to save hers. Why should I protect someone who's actively trying to hurt me? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I'm not saying she doesn't deserve it. I'm asking if this is who you want to be. I want to be someone who doesn't let bullies win. My whole life, she's faced zero consequences for her cruelty because everyone enables her, including me. Maybe if people see who she really is, she'll finally have to face herself. Or she'll find a way to make herself the victim again. Not if I do this right. I know her audience, the church ladies, the neighborhood association, the book club. I know exactly what matters to them and what would horrify them. This isn't just revenge, Daniel. It's justice. He studied my face for a long moment. You've already decided, haven't you? She took my childhood, my self-esteem, my peace. She's trying to take my reputation. I'm just returning the favor. The plan was intricate but elegant. The church's annual community dinner was coming up in 3 weeks, the biggest social event in Westerville's calendar. Margaret would be there in all her glory, playing the martyred mother while accepting sympathy for her lost daughter. I would be there too, with receipts literal and figurative. Every cruel email, every stolen dollar, every lie she'd told about me, all presented with the same professional polish I used to win million-dollar accounts. I sent an RSVP to the church dinner under my name. Let Margaret wonder why I was coming. Let her think I was crawling back. She had no idea what was really coming for her. The Queen of Westerville was about to lose her crown, and I would be the one to knock it off her head. The Westerville Community Center looked exactly as I remembered: beige walls, fluorescent lighting, and round tables decorated with Margaret's signature autumn centerpieces. I arrived at 6:30 p.m., 30 minutes into the cocktail hour, wearing my sharpest business suit and carrying a leather portfolio that contained 29 years of truth. The room fell silent when I walked in. Margaret stood near the dessert table, holding court with her circle of church ladies. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, then a forced smile as she realized everyone was watching. "Emily," she called out, her voice syrupy sweet. "How wonderful that you've come home." I walked straight to her, my heels clicking on the linoleum floor. "Hello, Mother. I heard you've been telling people I joined a cult." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Margaret's smile tightened. "Dear, this isn't the place." "Actually, it's the perfect place." I turned to address the room. Since my mother has been sharing her version of why I haven't been around, I thought everyone deserved to hear the truth. Richard appeared from nowhere, grabbing my arm. "Emily, don't do this." I shook him off. "Don't do what, Dad? Tell the truth. You should try it sometime." I opened my portfolio and pulled out a small projector, connecting it to my laptop. The church's white wall became my screen. For those who don't know me, I'm Emily Sanders. The daughter Margaret claims abandoned her family for a cult in Columbus. The truth is much simpler. I left because she told me to. The first slide appeared a screenshot of an email from Margaret. "Emily, your presentation was pathetic. Jennifer Morrison's daughter would never embarrass her family with such mediocre work." "That was after I won my first industry award," I said calmly. "Here's another from my college graduation day." The emails kept coming, each one more cruel than the last. The room was absolutely silent except for the hum of the projector. Margaret's face had gone from red to white. "Those are private," she started. "So were my bank accounts." The next slides showed the withdrawals from my college fund, matched against her purchases. While telling me we couldn't afford textbooks, she was buying designer handbags with my scholarship money. Gasps echoed through the room. Mrs. Patterson, the church treasurer supervisor, stood up for a closer look. And speaking of church finances, I continued, clicking to the next section. These are some interesting patterns in the women's auxiliary accounts. The evidence was damning deposits matching my stolen funds, withdrawals for charity that aligned with Margaret's credit card statements. The church ladies were no longer looking at Margaret with sympathy, but with horror. "You're twisting everything," Margaret shrieked. "This is why I cut you off. You're a manipulative liar who—" "I'm a liar." I laughed. "You told everyone I joined a cult. You told them you were heartbroken about losing me. But here's the truth." I clicked to the final slide, an audio file, my phone recording from that last Sunday dinner. Margaret's voice filled the room. "You're an embarrassment to this family. Get out and never come back." Then mine, Dad. Then silence. Richard's silence. I turned off the projector. I didn't abandon my family. I was thrown away. And the saddest part, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Margaret lunged at me, but 2 church board members held her back. She was screaming incoherently about ungrateful daughters and lies, but no one was listening anymore. They were all staring at the evidence I'd left on the tables, copies of everything I'd shown and more. Richard stood frozen, looking like a man watching his life crumble. "Emily, why?" "Because she destroyed my reputation while playing the victim. Because you let her abuse me for 29 years. Because someone needed to finally hold you both accountable." I looked around the room at the shocked faces. Margaret's shattered reputation scattered across the tables like broken glass. She always said I'd never amount to anything, but I became something she never expected someone strong enough to expose her. "Mrs. Patterson approached me, her voice stern. "These financial irregularities, we'll need to investigate. All the documentation is there," I said. "Every receipt, every transaction. I may not be the daughter she wanted, but I'm thorough." As I walked toward the exit, Margaret broke free and grabbed my shoulder. "You've ruined me." I turned to face her one last time. "No, Mother, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it." The last thing I saw before leaving was Richard finally finding his voice, turning to Margaret with a look of disgust I'd never seen before. "What did you do with her college money?" "Margaret." I walked out into the cool October evening, my heels clicking on the pavement, my phone already buzzing with Daniel's texts asking if I was okay. I was more than okay. For the first time in my life, I was free, not just from Sunday dinners or family obligations, but from the weight of carrying their secrets. Margaret had been right about one thing: I'd never come back, but she'd been wrong about everything else. I was not an embarrassment. I was not worthless. I was a survivor who'd finally fought back. The revenge was complete, served as cold and calculated as every criticism she'd ever dished out. And unlike her false tears and manufactured sympathy, my truth would stick. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just living well, it's making sure the truth finally sees the light.